Happy Easter to all of our students at Yonsei. Let me begin my Easter message by sharing how the Christian faith has sustained me personally and how much I owe to the living tradition of Christian servant leadership at Yonsei. I have had several major health problems since childhood, from life-threatening illnesses such as a blood clotting disorder to the loss of sight in my left eye. Now I'm speaking to you this Easter following world-class treatment at our Severance Hospital last month. My annual health checkup at Severance revealed a suspected very rare cancer, 1 or 2 cases per million. When I looked up the complicated medical term, I found there are only 2 centres in the entire UK, my native country, that deal with it. When one receives the news that one may have a serious health condition, of course, that brings a lot of things into perspective. I have 2 young children in elementary school. The older, my son Johan, is 11 years old. When my wife Yongjin told my daughter Hannah, who had her 10th birthday a week before I went into Severance Cancer Hospital for major surgery, she asked her mummy straight away, "Is Daddy going to die?" That is a very difficult thing to hear as a parent. We always want to protect our family from pain. Life is not free from pain and suffering, however. Christians know this and have faced this problem from the earliest times. Some of you may be familiar with the writings of C.S. Lewis, perhaps the most popular and widely read Christian writer of the 20th century. At our International Christian Faculty Association meetings this semester, supported by the chaplaincy, we shall discuss together his classic, Mere Christianity. Lewis wrote a powerful book in 1940, early in the Second World War, when Britain faced the full power of the Nazis, called The Problem of Pain. In his own life, he was certainly confronted repeatedly by the profound problem of pain and the reality of suffering. As a boy, his beloved mother died of cancer. As a young college student, he left Oxford to fight in the trenches of the First World War. After less than 4 years of marriage, his deeply loved wife, Joy, died of cancer. After his adult conversion and return to Christianity, he reflected on how his difficult experiences as a child and young man had led him to atheism. This was and is a perfectly understandable reaction to the tragedy and trauma that are part of the human condition. Perhaps many of you have similar thoughts or responses in your own view of Christianity. I don't pretend my health crisis was easy to deal with. I can say honestly, though, that I took comfort and encouragement from the prayers of my family, friends, and fellow church members here in Korea and in the UK. Our chaplains prayed for me. Many of my Yonsei colleagues prayed for me. My wife, Yongjin, who has been a rock of Christian faith and role model for me throughout our marriage, stayed with me in the hospital throughout, thanks to help from my Korean mum and dad, Yongjin's parents, who looked after Johan and Hannah. When I went into the operating theatre at the Severance Cancer Hospital, I saw on the ceiling, as I waited on my general anesthetic, the message of the prophet Isaiah. "So do not fear, for I am with you." The verse continues, "Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Providentially, the doctor giving the anesthetic is in our church fellowship group and prayed with me right before she put me to sleep. I spent almost 3 weeks in hospital recovering from surgery. As a faculty member from a place 6,000 miles away from Korea, Britain, it can sometimes feel very challenging indeed to live here as a non-Korean. At this hugely difficult time for myself and my family, though, I felt immensely blessed to be part of the Yonsei community. I was cared for by everybody I met with total dedication and kindness, from the immensely skilled surgeon, who told me that both his father and grandfather were also surgical professors at Yonsei, to the cleaner, who always gave me a gentle and encouraging smile every day. I'm sure many of you have also had difficulties and challenges in your life, perhaps in dealing with social expectations and pressures. Some of you may also have suffered the pain of loss and bereavement or illness, personally or in your family. Before my recent treatment, I was blessed to meet and worship with the leaders of the Severance Medical Mission, which carries out medical training and treatments in Korea and overseas for people from developing nations. I heard testimonies that touched me deeply, such as the personal story of a surgeon from Nepal who works at a hospital dedicated to treating leprosy, Hansen's disease. He became a Christian after working with Christians who devoted themselves to treating these poor and stigmatized patients in Nepal. He had studied medicine in China and speaks fluent Chinese as well as English, along with his native language. He could be a man of great wealth by moving to work as a physician somewhere like the US or UK, but had given his life to serve and treat for free those who would otherwise be unable to receive any treatment. Talking to him over coffee after the service, I was reminded of the inspirational story of our own Professor Florence Murray, the Canadian Presbyterian missionary who contributed hugely to the development of both Iwa and Yonsei's medical programs. She later treated leprosy patients in Wonju and led the Christian hospital that was a key foundation of our Wonju Mireille campus. Dr. Murray was born and died in Pictou, Nova Scotia, New Scotland, where the first Gaelic-speaking Scottish Highlanders had arrived in 1773. I visited the reconstructed ship several years ago when I gave a presentation at the 18th Century Scottish Studies Society's research conference that was held in Nova Scotia. As a Scot, it was very moving to see the deep historical connections linking my country of birth and ancestral homeland with Korea via Canada, particularly through the huge global impact of Presbyterianism that has shaped the identity of Scots, both in Scotland itself and across the global diaspora for centuries. This Easter, Yonsei is still a living witness to Christ's love for us. As Christians greet each other in celebration and respond on Easter Sunday, Alleluia, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Easter is a unique time in our calendar. It is the very core of the Christian faith. Easter commemorates the sacrificial atonement of Jesus for us on the cross and his resurrection. My exploration of Christian history for our Easter message aims to give a very brief sense of the relationship of Christianity and history. As a professor whose teaching and research at our Underwood International College focus on history, including the impact of Christian missionaries such as our founders Horace Grant Underwood and Oliver R. Avison, I mean that Christianity and history are deeply interconnected. Christianity is a faith rooted in history and historical understanding. Having played a huge role in the shaping of modern Korea, Yonsei embodies how Christianity has been and still is one of the greatest forces in the shaping of global history. As I noted, I have faced significant challenges in my own life. The Christian faith and community helped me cope with these difficult problems, such as my illnesses and the death of my mother. At the broadest level, the Christian faith is a profoundly historical religion. Christianity is about a God who deals with humanity in history. For Christians, God has entered history and fulfilled it in the person of Jesus Christ. The Christian understanding of God emphasizes Christ, the Son of God, as the liberator of history. Yonsei's motto, John chapter 28, verse 32, states, "If you continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." For Christians, God is deeply concerned about humanity and how people live their lives in history. To Christians, salvation, becoming truly free through the truth of Christ, is not about fleeing our painfully complex world or the personal difficulties that we face, such as bereavement or illness. It is about living with God and having new hope through the Easter message of Christ's resurrection that leads us to renewed faith, discipleship, and witness. My Easter message for our Yonsei community is motivated by cherishing the heritage of Christian faith that has inspired me personally, particularly due to my own Scottish roots and the godly examples of my grandmother and mother, nurtured in the Reformed Protestant faith of the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. I wish to share with you my conviction that the Reformed tradition provides resources, clues, and inspiration for life. The Presbyterian Church historian and theologian John H. Leith argued that ancient traditions that have been tested by time provide depth and perspective in a day when life is frequently rootless, shallow, and even banal. As a Christian historian, I believe it is important for all of us to have a critical and reflective perspective to understand these deep foundations for the house of faith that is the Christian community. Leith stressed, yet traditions can provide this depth only when gratitude for them is balanced by critical judgment of them. No one tradition exhausts the meaning of Christian faith, and every tradition has its share of false starts, mistaken judgments, and betrayals of its own best convictions. It has much to offer contemporary human beings as they attempt to be Christian in the grand and awful days in which we are living, but only if it is appropriated by a living community that unites appreciation with critical acumen. Having highlighted Leith's excellent book, which is in the Yonsei library, I should highlight an even more direct guide for my talk today. The Oxford theologian and church historian Alistair McGrath's superb book, Roots That Refresh, a celebration of Reformation spirituality. McGrath argues, the spirituality of the Reformation was so deeply rooted in the Christian tradition that it can justly be described as classic. Yet it was sufficiently responsive to the new situations then developing that it can equally be described as modern. Mingling the classic and the modern, the Reformation is thus well placed to address the needs of our own day and age, when a consciousness of modernity is often tempered with an awareness of the need for stability and continuity with the past. As a historian with a deep appreciation of the Protestant, especially the Reformed tradition, this is something I think is crucial. Reformation Protestantism constitutes a rich resource for us now in our modern, or indeed postmodern world. Many of us are anxious and unhappy in our ever more materialistic times, perhaps especially amongst the younger generation. Many of you deal with great pressure and stress. Many of us are fundamentally rootless. Jesus explained our foundation in faith in the parable of the house builders at the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. Protestant was the name given to the churches that share a common root in the Reformation in 16th century Europe. Alistair McGrath's book, Roots That Refresh, helps us understand the Reformation tradition of Protestant spirituality. There is much to be learned from the Reformation maxim, Ecclesia Reformata, Ecclesia Semper Reformanda. The Reformed Church must be a church which is always reforming itself. This continuous change and renewal means we must always return to our refreshing roots. Christ used the image of pruning to keep a vine healthy to bear fruit in John 15, 4-7. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. Protestant Christians stress the key principle, to God alone the glory. Lovers of classical music may know that the composer Johann Sebastian Bach always wrote when he'd finished a piece of music the letters SDG, the Latin Soli Deo Gloria. This key concept of divine sovereignty, to God alone the glory, shaped Protestant attitudes toward church government and even political secular authority. Historians and social scientists often argue that Reformed Protestants have done more than perhaps any other group to shape the modern world, politically and socioeconomically. The best-known expression of this argument is Max Weber's book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. McGrath summarizes the historical transformations brought by the Reformation. Spirituality was not merely brought to the people. New forms of the spiritual life were created, with their needs and situations firmly in view. Mirrored in this shift may be seen the political, social, economic, and religious changes which lie at the heart of the formation of modern Western culture. The essence of the Christian faith is God's love, given through Jesus Christ, who sacrificed himself on the cross on Good Friday. The foundation of the church and Christian faith is this good news, gospel of the grace of God. Like the great English writer John Bunyan, whose character Christian had to undergo the trials and tribulations of the Pilgrim's Progress, and as Bunyan also recorded in his spiritual autobiography, Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, the reformer John Calvin believed every Christian will suffer from doubt and crises of faith. As we saw, this was true of C.S. Lewis, one of the most celebrated Christian authors. Like Lewis's biographer, Oxford's Alistair McGrath, he was an atheist before returning to the Christian faith, influenced by his great friend, fellow author, and Oxford scholar J.R.R. Tolkien. Ultimately, as Christians, our house of faith is built on solid foundations. At this special time for all Christians to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, I pray that all of us find inspiration in the Easter message of God offering us spiritual renewal in his risen Son. I pray you will find in Christ a revived hope and solid foundation for your life this Easter. Alleluia, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Amen.